Hello, welcome back to the Do More podcast. We're so excited that you're here. The Traveling Mic series is doing its thing around the country, and we are interviewing experts and change makers who are doing all the things, the most in their field, to find out what is happening in their space. Today, I have Julia Norrish with us. Thanks for joining us, Julia.
Of course, it's amazing to be here. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, so fun. And our topic and theme today is all around creativity, storytelling, and early learning. And so, brace yourselves for a great conversation. In true Do More style, we always start with a fun and playful question. This is totally unscripted. And so I'll pose the question and then the listeners will have to wait because you'll only answer right at the end, Julia. That's the rules.
Okay. So, good, I get some minutes to prepare.
Exactly. So here's the question. If you could pick a well-known children's story, okay, I'm asking you to bring the Nourish unexpected ending and revise the ending for us. So pick your story and give it the Nourish touch. Okay, that's the task for the end of
Good.
the
No small feat.
No small feat. Maybe you can introduce yourself to our guests. It's always really exciting to hear professionals finding their way in their career path, but specifically you've been doing so much exciting work in the literacy and creativity space, as well as distribution and publishing. I mean, it goes all over. So maybe you could share with us a little bit about who is Julia and what's been your journey.
That's a lovely question. I think that's nicer than sending through a bio and having it read back to you and then cringing slightly. And who is Julia is I always try to ask people when I meet them. I try not to say, what do you do? Because our jobs are part of our lives. Sometimes we're lucky enough that they reflect our lives, but often I'll say, how do you spend your time? Because everyone has different ways of, we all share a trait as humans that we have a certain amount of time here. We don't know how long it is, and how we choose to spend it tells us a lot about who that person is. So who am I, which is a nice question. In terms of the professional journey, I was super lucky out of university to spot an internship at the Publishing Association of South Africa. They place interns at different publishing houses, and I studied English literature, French literature, and the history of art. So I think you can see the creativity coming in from the beginning. And I hadn't thought about publishing, actually. UCT didn't have a publishing course. Wits in Pretoria, I think, is where you can do more media and publishing. And actually, it's such a wonderful combination of words and visual, the visual world. So I saw that, jumped on that, wasn't sure. My honours thesis had been in kind of the French translation of Disgrace by J.M. Coetzee. So I wasn't thinking early literacy at all. I was going a little bit more to the academic side. I ended up leaving that one half finished to actually do a new thesis in early literacy and how we level text complexity for young children. Interviewing people like Shelley O'Carroll at WordWorks. Even when I was a student, I'm very interested in that and the Nali Bali group. I was running a reading club at the time at university, a Nali Bali reading club, and involved in education outreach. So I think that was always the creativity and social impact were always threads for me. I was very fortunate to get placed at an interesting publishing house doing innovative work. Arthur Atwell's Electric Bookworks. It's been through some identity changes in the last 10 years as well, but they're still testing the boundaries of publishing and how do we publish more fairly and better for developing economies to increase access to information and books. And so there I got exposed to, really, I wasn't making anyone coffee like a normal intern does. I was doing fascinating projects from the beginning. And then Book Dash came from there. So Book Dash had been an experiment, an idea that was kind of nurtured within and came from Electric Bookworks as could we really change the landscape of access to children's books for all children if we did things a little bit differently, and might it work? And with my background, running a reading club for kind of grade 1s, 2s, and 3s, but really always knowing earlier would have been better, and my interest in words and the visual, it seemed like a really good project, a kind of fledgling project for me to take on full time. And then, with the understanding of publishing that I got through the 6 months of internship. And then that was my story for 8-9 years, leading and growing and nurturing Book Dash to get books to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of kids around the country. And last year I made the decision that I had got the fledgling to a point where it could fly. And it was my kind of time to move on or step away slightly. I'm still slightly involved, and Book Dash is on its own new journey. Yeah, so I'm now working freelance on different projects which is new for me. Part of it was I wanted more space to do some of my own creative projects and creative pursuits, or just to see what those turn into, because I put a lot of things aside to really dedicate a lot of my time and effort and energy to Book Dash, and I don't regret the day, but it did feel it's a little bit more time for me now. So I work with a few different organizations on publishing, reading promotion, early literacy. How can we do meaningful work in those spaces?
Wow, super awesome. And what do you do when you're not changing the literary world by storm? Anything else about Julia that's relevant here?
I write a lot of poetry and I love it, and I thank many different people for exposing me to it. And there's a rich poetry scene in South Africa, lots of open mics, lots of poetry festivals, lots of publications. But I had to write a bio for it, and all of my poems, I said I tried to fit too much life into one day and too many words into one line. There's so much in the world that I want to do and experience. So when you ask me, what do I do when I'm not doing something else? It's usually it's like I'm just doing something else, and I try to rest sometimes, but I will wake up in the day and just think, how do I make the most of this day? And I get my friends and family get a bit irritated with me because they say I'm putting too much pressure on each day. But I write, I paint, I do a lot of painting, visual art. I love to be with kids and family, and to go dancing, and also have quiet time reading. And I think all the things that nurture us, and which for me lie very deeply in creativity and exploring the world, being curious about it.
What an intro, actually, given that the topic of today is around creativity and thinking about creativity as a life skill. Maybe you can share with us a little bit around your developing idea around creativity. What is it? Can we buy it? Should we buy it? Is it something that's grown? Where should we be thinking about creativity, or where's your head at in terms of what is this thing?
So creativity for me, and this is why I get so passionate about it. I think a lot of people, when they think creativity, they think of the typical, and probably what I'm kind of into, so I'm not the best model for saying that it's bigger than that, but writing, art, maybe they think of music and dance, and kind of physical expression. But really, for me, creativity is it's a kind of orientation. It's a way of seeing the world where you can you can see how the world is at the moment. I mean, that's also a matter of perspective, but you see what is, and then you can hold in your head something that isn't yet, and you can kind of pull it forwards into current time. And that is an incredibly powerful skill set to be able to see how things could be different, and then have an image in your head, visualize it, and then see how to make it. And that's what writers, and I think the really interesting thing about creativity and when it starts getting quite juicy is like we're not always conscious of it. It's not a logical process. You're not going, here's my spreadsheet and here's my plan and I'm going to do it this way. When you're painting, when you're writing, when you're dancing, you're following an intuition and it's saying do this next, and you're listening. And a lot of what's happening in the world at the moment, I think, is because there's a desire for power without a curiosity, without an empathy, and without a sense of creativity. How could we do this better? It's quite a reactional, quite a transactional process. So for me, creativity extends beyond the arts, beyond the humanities. It's in science, it's in engineering, it's in business, it's all over. And that's why I say it's a life skill. But the same way that we say unstructured play is really important, unstructured creativity is really important as well. Creativity that isn't for your work. So just letting yourself be, because humans are creative. We're born with that skill. There's a great quote, if you'll allow me to read it. It's quite short. One of my absolute favorite writers, she's just incredible. She's a British writer called Jeanette Winterson. She says, this came up in response to someone sharing about play and play-based learning and the kind of science behind that. And she says, show me a child who doesn't want to paint a picture, a child who doesn't want to hear a story and tell it back to you. Kids sing and dance, they love music, they invent games and characters. They will build a kingdom out of pots and pans. I love that. Then we put them through an education system that says that the arts are a luxury. The arts develop our natural creativity, and if creativity is a luxury, then being human is a luxury.
Wow.
So that's kind of how I feel about.
I mean, that's some goosebump stuff right there. I think yeah. I mean, do we pack up and go home?
Jeanette is always good with her mic drop moments. I saw she has a Substack newsletter now, and that made my day because I think I've read everything else she's ever written.
I need to get in on that or like loop in a link because wow, that's some wisdom. I think there's so much we could unpack there, and I think to start off with that point of creativity is out there, and it's not only for the artists or the musicians. It's not a humanities only space. It's also for the scientists, for the medical profession, for, all the people involved in the medical world. And children, which I think sometimes we often say, grow up or stay in line. And it's like, actually, there's so much fun to be had in the space of creativity and the learning that comes from it. Because why should a kingdom not be made of pots and pans? I'm in.
And why do we stop being able to see that? Kids don't need to be told to imagine. They do it naturally. So that's, I think, where I get excited. This isn't something we need to learn how to do. It's something we need to learn to stop doing. Stop, as you said, be quiet, sit down, grow up. And then we all know when you get to grow up, it's not all it's made out to be. So it's not, and it's something that kids can remind us how to do. I've always thought that it's the job of the young to kind of remind the old how to be brave and how to be courageous. And creativity takes courage. Because you're saying it doesn't have to be this way. It could be this way. How about this? And what if? And then you have to get someone in on your game too, or take their ideas, and that takes a lot of courage.
Definitely. I mean, this is the question for you then. How do we give ourselves more permission to be creative? Because I think that's such a stumbling block actually for this thing, whether you're an adult trying to build the courage or a child fighting to keep the courage. It's that tension. Yeah. I feel like permission is part of it. Like we need to let ourselves do that, create that space.
Mm. Well, I think the one thing is that we can expand our understanding of creativity. So anyone listening now could think, oh, I've always told myself I'm not creative. I meet people all the time who say, oh, Julia, so lovely that you do all these creative things. I'm not creative. I don't have a creative bone in my body. So firstly, the one bit is we can take ownership over how we see the world really influences how we see ourselves in the world, and we can change that. A lot of people think it's set in stone. So you can redefine for yourself what creativity means, and you can include whatever you do. I mean, how you make your kids breakfast in the morning can be creative. How you dress can be creative. I mean, fashion is a massive industry that is built on our sense of who we are and our style, interior design, all of those things, your business, your medical science. So firstly, I would say expand your definitions so that you include yourself. And the National Reading Barometer that came out, it was probably 2 years ago now, but it feels like last year. What they did, sorry, I'm going a little bit on a tangent here, but I thought what they did was so clever. They did a nationally representative survey of reading behaviors in the country. And then instead of saying, because previous surveys of this nature had been done before, and based on a certain set of criteria that someone handed down from who knows where, it's saying this percentage of the country reads and displays positive reading behavior, and this percentage, like, we don't have a reading culture. And they decided to do something a bit differently with this survey and say, instead of saying this group are readers and this group aren't, you're saying you have different types of readers. You have occasional readers, you have readers who read for information and more transactional, you have readers who read for joy, so it included everyone in the definition of a reader, unless they really, didn't read at all, which is almost everyone reads, and I don't mean only the formal definition of like decoding text. I mean interacts with language and literacy. Litasa and a group called Bualit, but it's becoming more accepted, insist on or have this lovely phrase that literacy is a social practice. It's not confined to the classroom or when you're reading your book on the couch or whatever. It's a social practice. We're interacting with language and literacy all the time. So what the National Reading Barometer did in making it an inclusive definition, what I found really helpful, and saying, yes, it would be better if we had more people who read for enjoyment out of choice, but we're not excluding people who don't. And I think the same can be done with creativity. And then on the other hand, I think kids, just give yourself permission. Like, no, if in this life, if you don't give yourself permission, no one's going to, I always say to people, like, if you're not running your show, someone else is running your show. So it doesn't mean bold over people and put like make your own way at the expense of others. It just means look out for yourself first. And everyone around you will be happier if you're happier, is always my thing. So I was thinking last night, like when we think about the well-being of young children, and this I know is something you're very passionate about, we need to think about the well-being of the people around them, their kind of satellites or the people who hold them in orbit. And creativity for me, allowing yourself to express, to dance, to sing, to laugh, to draw, even if you're bad at it. I think that's where I get so passionate. I play tennis. I mean, not very well, but I admire, no. And I watch a lot more tennis than I play, but I don't go, I'm not going to go play tennis this weekend because I'm not Carlos Alcaraz and I'm not going to like win the Grand Slams. But people somehow think that if they can't be Monet, then they shouldn't paint a picture. Or if they can't be, Beyonce, they shouldn't sing. And so that's, I think, just go for it and give yourself permission. And then that tells people around you, it gives them permission as well. So I think to kind of be brave, take the first step, and then show the kids, the look of joy on a kid's face when an adult is silly or paints a picture or joins them in a dance. And it's all very obviously linked up in play-based education. I mean, play is the epitome of creativity.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that movement in the early childhood development sector. We're seeing the play-based learning kind of principles coming up time and time again. And the research is talking to it too. So like, this is not just an idea. This is like a really tried and tested idea. And it is really exciting to see organizations, many of them, getting behind the early literacy kind of agenda. I think that's like really exciting. Do you have thoughts on the storytelling side of creativity? Because I think that's something that's clearly very much on your radar. It's been part of your journey, and I'd be curious to know about the tool that you see of storytelling, like for creating that well-being in a child's life.
Yeah, I mean, look, I love words and stories, and so I'm probably on the far end of the spectrum in terms
on the biased side here.
Yeah, but again, there's a huge amount of evidence and research. In fact, on Book Dash's website, you can go and read a lovely publication that we put together a few years ago, pulling together not all, because that would be impossible, but really the most compelling evidence around why stories and sharing books and reading with young children is so impactful. If you're a skeptic or a scientist who wants to see the facts, what I will say is that there are two questions here for me. One is, stories are what humans are, right? If you think about all the major stories of creation, of spirituality, of religion, those are stories. They have been handed down from generation to generation to generation. It's how humans, it's a tool and device that humans have invented to pass on knowledge from one generation to another. And that's partly why they say humans have advanced ahead of other animals, because we are able to record information and pass it down, either in language or when we learned to write. And then when the printing press came out, that was a massive explosion of distribution of information. So if you think if every generation had to start from scratch, we wouldn't be where we are. That might be better in some ways, but anyway, we invented stories and language, especially things like poems and the old poems like the Odyssey and local type versions. Those were written in lyrical language and rhyme so that they could be easily remembered, so that they could be passed along. On the other hand, so I really believe stories are all we have, actually. And Margaret Atwood says it in a lovely way. She says, in the end, we all become stories. And I think that kind of hits home a little bit, because you think bigger than your own life. One day you'll be a story. You won't be here physically anymore. And you hope that it's a good story. But if we pull that back in, we are actually, all we are at the moment anyway, even in current time, is stories, and we are the stories we tell ourselves. So the story we tell ourselves about our life is the story that our life will be. On the more practical side, when you share stories with young children, a lot of studies and observations of kind of interactions with young children, play-based, really, based on all your responsive caregiving, nurturing care. You're looking for that serve and return. You're giving children lots of information and data, because they're these tiny little scientists who are just trying to work out how the world works and why do we do this and why do we do that. I was thinking about kids before they have language. They can't even ask yet, so they're just trying to grasp as much data as they can every second. I don't know if you're familiar with this statistic, but it still blows my mind. The Center for the Developing Child at Harvard and their amazing work. They did neural scans on babies, and between 0 and 2 years old, children are making 1 million new neural connections a second. That's just like, you can't
Crazy.
even... No wonder they need to nap a lot. I don't know if that is also when they're sleeping. Maybe it's when they're awake.
Every mother listening right now is so chuffed that you just said that, and they're like, oh, now
my baby's a genius.
I understand everything.
Yeah. So they also looked at of the various ways that adults tend to interact with children, what's the most conducive. And this is not saying that's the only way, definitely not saying that, but what elicits the most interaction, the most serve and return? Are you serving something to the baby, they're returning something for whatever is appropriate at their stage? And books tend to just have a kind of magic that they introduce, and a toy would do the same, but a book is this kind of real concentration of visual language and the rest of the world. So they often refer to books as windows and or mirrors. So a window book would kind of show you something that you've never seen, like snow. If you're like a South African, most of South African children wouldn't have seen snow or even the sea or whatever. Those are better later on in life. In very early formative years, a child needs mirrors. They need validation that they exist. They need to see themselves, recognize themselves in books and things that are around them. So a lot of what Book Dash published focused on correcting almost the balance between South African kids get exposed to a lot of, if they're exposed to books, they get a lot of window books. And there's that famous Chimamanda Adichie quote that the danger of a single story, and she talks about being exposed to a lot of white Christmas type storybooks when she was young, like Snow, and she just didn't see herself in books. And so Book Dash tries to correct that. And yeah, so when you're looking at a book with a child, and I say looking at because you're not necessarily reading the text to the child, either because that's not really the best practice thing to do, but it also why that's so valuable is that it means that adult readers who aren't confident, or even if the text is in a different language, you're basically just using the book as a toy. I sometimes kind of make that for people. Look, point to the pictures, talk about what you're seeing, ask the child what they think, even if they're pre-verbal. They have, there's a lot more happening in their brains than their muscles, their like mouth muscles are able to express yet. I think baby sign language has showed a lot of people that suddenly the child can do the sign for love or more or home, but they can't say the word yet because it's very fine muscles that require the magic of what we're doing now, which is me saying things that are in my head to you aloud through weird sounds, and you understand what I say and you say something back. It's just a miracle every time I stop to think about it.
Like what even actually, and the ability for that to develop over time. Like I've watched with my own children in my home to see like language develop, vocabulary develop, and the other day my Lila heard a word. What was it? Oh, yank. And she said, "What is yank?" And it's like these really, it's a short word, but like actually, how do you explain this word that has a lot of feeling to it? And in the English language, they aren't always those words that have that like whereas in Afrikaans or some of the African languages, you get these really significant words emotive words that hold it. Sometimes English needs a number of verbs to like adjectives to like give you this word, that feels like something. Anyway, and I see that in my own home.
Yeah. No, it's incredible. And if you think actually how quickly it happens, given the complexity of the skill. So I think when people also think, oh, why can't children read? But like, it's not to say that kids don't have the capacity to learn to read by when they should, kind of early in the foundation phase or even late. It happens differently for different children. I think I'll also just be very clear on that. But if you do pause to think about the complexity of the skills that are also intertwined, reading, writing, and so there's receptive language, which is you understand what's being said to you, either through reading or listening. And then there's expressive language, and you're able to produce language that is in line with what you have in your head. And I think for me, it just occurred to me now, that's also why creativity matters so much, because if we go back to the premise that the first question you asked me is, what is creativity? And for me, it's about it's being able to hold something in your head that doesn't yet exist. Maybe it exists in another country or something, but you can, and then language is the ability to then communicate that, or a creative expression in a picture. And if you're not able to do that, just imagine how difficult it is in life to make your own way. If you can't see it and then communicate what you need from the people around you. Yeah, I think getting those skills and the confidence and the value of that to children is, as I say, it's a life skill. It's setting them up for being able to make their own way.
Yeah, and I guess just like any skill is something that needs to be nurtured and grown over time. It's not like this once-off thing that we make it, or you try it the first time and it just, and some people are naturally gifted, right? You have to, I suppose, acknowledge that there is natural gifting, but I think it's also something that you can explore because there are so many ways to be creative. Yeah, very exciting, and I think.
I was going to say that's where, and we are definitely moving towards this with the play-based, like accepting that and encouraging that. But also, if we're thinking about emergent literacy, it's definitely, just to clarify for anyone listening, it's not teaching kids to read and write at preschool age. That's not developmentally appropriate. It's creating the the orientation and the interest and the curiosity and the we've actually moved away from pre-literacy because these are literacy skills that are developmentally appropriate. But open-ended questions, what do you think? How would you feel? You're asking a child to take what's in their brain or their feeling, their kind of spirit, and put it into words. And you're asking them also to develop an opinion if they didn't have already. So that is building the creativity. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in homes, fostering that connection, those connections between each other as a family unit where we can share these ideas is also an incredible outcome for a family where we're also seeing children not verbalizing or vocalizing their needs or the stories or the experiences that they're having. And time and time again, we're seeing the significance of that in the home, just as much as the classroom. So playful learning at home is just as significant as playful learning in the classroom. Let that be known. The other thing that your reflections have really sparked in me is like we have this massive, I want to say, like tsunami coming for us where innovation is an everyday reality. Technology is alive and well, and the future generations, the children that are in preschool today, are going to have to learn to innovate because that's becoming a part of our world, and so creativity is actually becoming a skill that is not only like a nice to have, it is essential because there are futures that we don't yet know, and we want the children of today to be able to manage, tackle, and thrive, and actually leave the world better than what we have, really.
It's, for me, it kind of equates to like a resourcefulness. And if I could pick one skill to give every single child currently young, as you said, that resourcefulness is going to be, I don't know, for me, that if I could pick one to give everyone, that's what I would give them. And I think creative practice it really fosters that. So creativity is not the end, it's a means to, I mean, it can also just be for itself, and just the joy and the peace and the healing that comes with it. Because again, when we're creating, often we're in a space, they often call it like a flow state, or for me, it's akin to sleeping. It's a way that a part of yourself rests and explores, and it just is. We are beings, and we're being when we're creative, as opposed to produce and get in line and do and make the economy better.
Yes. Work.
Yeah. So, and I just wanted to say also again around stories and the home. I mean, often when I'm talking about stories and sharing books with children, I am, in my head, is the home environment. I think if we think about young kids in South Africa, they're kind of half split between in early learning programs and at home. And even if they're in an early learning program, they're still at home for the rest of the time. And so, for me, books and stories are just a really easy, practical, evidence-based intervention and tool to, plus a bit of support for the parents but parents hook on quickly once they see how much insight they're getting into their child when they read and look at the pictures and ask questions with them. And we at Book Dash, we used to get so much feedback. It gives me goosebumps from partners who would ask parents, what what difference did the books make or anything. And the parents would time and time again say, I didn't know, and I was talking about a 1, 2, 3-year-old child, didn't know my child was so clever. I didn't know that they had their own feelings, like, because and if we can foster respect, like mutual respect between caregiver and a 1, 2-year-old child, I think your chances of responsive caregiving, respectful caregiving, giving the child what they need, noticing if they're hungry or if they need something different, listening when they speak eventually and express their opinions, that could really shift things.
Sure. I mean, it's humbling, right, to see the use of a tool so simple as a book, some pages, words, and a picture. The stories that we tell and the way in which we engage with children can matter that much and foster, so much. And I guess to also acknowledge the incredible work that Book Dash has made and will continue to make in the space is remarkable. Like in an economy like we are experiencing, in a country where books are not the norm in every home. I guess you have to acknowledge that kind of work. So
thank you. And so it was
piece of history to be a part of,
And a massive team effort. Every creative who made books with us, the management team, the donors, the partners who distributed the books for us. I mean, last I counted, I'm sure it's moved on or they're planning more print runs at the moment, but last I counted it was about 4.5 million books. And these are locally produced in local languages that are in the landscape in the last 9 years. And hopefully it will grow and grow as more people realize that, the value of that investment. And just how something simple can change a cycle. It's not the only thing for sure, but it's a big hitting and relatively easy to roll out change.
Wow. Well, for our listeners out there, I feel like this is the invitation to find some space, dance right, move, tell a story, dress a little bit differently tomorrow. So, thanks for inspiring us around that. What would you like to leave the listeners with? Parting thoughts on creativity.
I have another writer that I will borrow his words because again, this is a poet, Gregory Orr, and the poem I find whenever I'm looking at things around a certain topic or coincidences happen, and I don't really believe in coincidence, but you suddenly see all these threads, and this actually links with what Jeanette Winterson said so nicely about creativity is to be human. The poem is called, it's very short, it's called To Be Alive by Gregory Orr. I can pop it in the link as well. And he says, to be alive, not just the carcass, but the spark. That's crudely put, but if we're not supposed to dance, then why all this music? And I just think that is, for me, that captures the world is the most exceptional place. Why all of this music? Why all of this ability to do something magical with our life, bigger than you maybe thought possible.
Wow. I mean, if there ever was a moment to realize the music is all around us, I feel like that is it. So thank you so much for unpacking your thoughts and going down the rabbit holes, for bringing in the significance of books and storytelling and I guess just contextualizing it for us in South Africa for the ECD sector. But I feel like this conversation is far beyond young children. It's for everyone. And I think, one last thing to say is that we tend to think creativity, as I said, is a luxury or can't happen in resource poor scenarios or where we're in a budget constrained condition. That's almost where creativity thrives the best. Someone shared something with me once that was like, the more a toy does, the less a child needs to imagine. So actually these simpler toys or boxes or toilet rolls or, very simple, we can do a lot with very little. And the act of making toys and games and books out of nothing is in itself creative. And so we mustn't think, South Africa
creativity is for later,
Wow.
when we're richer. It's the absolute opposite.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And I think it's also just then saying yes to that. Want to be creative? Yes. Like, want to do
Yes.
this? Yes.
Draw in the sand. You don't need oil paints. Like, you can dance. You can make your own music. Yes. Yeah. That's such a powerful thing that you've picked up on. Creativity is saying yes to life. It's saying yes and I'm going to add my own thing, and we're going to do this, and that fosters life force, that gives the etymology of enthusiasm is like theos, and the theos is the god, so it's with the power of the gods. And isn't that so cool? So enthusiasm, we're saying yes to life, and I think that will save us, and that's why people say creativity will save us. There are organizations built around that, and I love that.
Amazing. So our listeners have been listening, painstakingly waiting to hear the Norrish ending that no one expected to a children's story that we love. Give us the summary.
Oh my goodness, you really set me up here. I think, what about if there's one that I love, but no one will know. It's a bit obscure. So I don't know if everyone knows the story Goodnight Moon. And it's a very peaceful, lovely story. A little teddy bear, a little rabbit is saying, "Goodnight moon, goodnight cows, goodnight," jumping over the moon. He's just saying goodnight to everything in his room. And it's the most beautiful, peaceful part. He says goodnight to the kittens, the fire, the mouse, even his food. And what if actually they just decide to have a midnight feast and a party, and they turn on the music, they have a little Joel in the room. Yes, and maybe the parents who you never see come in and do it with it, and just because the other story I also have is about a kid going to bed. Clearly, I have issues with bedtime. Because that's when you have to say, okay, today was enough, and I struggle to do that. And my thinking for that story as well is Mortimer keeps being told to go to bed, go to bed, go to bed, and he makes his own noise of pots and pans and rattle, bing, bang, and clang, and he's doing his own thing. And I just wish his parents would say, come downstairs, let's have a party together, and stop stomping up the stairs and telling him to be quiet and be not a child. So...
Lovely. Well, thank you for sharing us the never-ending day.
That is what they should call it.
Totally. And when day leads to night leads to day. Thank you so much for sharing. And we're so looking forward to watching your journey unfold, and with such support of the creativity that you are bringing to the world. Don't stop creating.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. And this podcast in itself is something that was seen and then pulled into the world, and it's really adding so much value to the ACD sector. So thank you for creating it.
Playtime.